Hello, welcome
Hello.
everyone. Super excited to get started. I'm Christina Stapke, owner of Sea+Spruce Nutrition, and today I'm interviewing Andrea Assouad, who is a certified nutritionist. And we're going to be doing, an interview and kind of learning more about her story, her philosophy, how she works with different individuals with different health conditions. Really excited to dive in. And if anyone's tuning in, would love to have you like or comment. We can answer any questions that come up about Andrea too and her approach. Let's dive in. So Andrea, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, hi. Happy to do this. Excited to be talking to you. A little bit about me. I think the best place to start is I have a background in agriculture. My family are six generational farmers here in Washington State, and food was really and has always been a way of life for us, not necessarily in the way one might first assume. It was more around the focus of the health of the soil, navigating weathers or environmental factors for each of the crops, and being kind of in the know of various techniques and technologies that we would need to use to optimize operations. And in many ways, all of this can describe how we as humans can navigate our health as well. Integrative nutrition is actually a second career of mine. I was in the nutrition, marketing, and health communication space for over a decade. And as a result, I have a strange, intense amount of knowledge around food production, food labeling, kind of all the good, the bad, and the ugly that comes with having a consumer choose a food and being educated in terms of what to pay attention to on a label, what to pay attention to in an article, and ultimately, how to make food choices, which is can be really complex in terms of navigating. So in my career, I worked alongside and I did a lot of ghostwriting for dietitians, food technologists, nutritionists, and I started to really gain a different perspective in terms of how food can work for us and how it should be fueling our body. So with that, I started to feel a little less than fulfilled in that role, and I wanted to really understand the whole concept behind food as medicine. So that's what sort of instigated me getting my master's in integrative medicine with a focus in nutrition.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's so interesting you're hearing your background and how, I mean, you really were exposed to so much about like how we grow our food and the whole process, which so many of us are so disconnected from. So it's awesome that you really do have roots, no pun intended, in that area, but also you got exposed to like, again, like the other interesting side of, how we get our food, which is the marketing piece. And we're drawn to that other area of integrative nutrition. So wonderful. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. And I wanted to learn, I wanted to kind of tell our audience a little bit more about a focus that you have, because I know an area of interest for you is individuals with skin issues. Tell us a little bit more about what made you to decide to focus on that area in particular.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. I specialize in a few different areas, one of which is hormonal imbalance, which can negatively affect someone's skin, their gut, other areas or systems within the body. But personally, I struggled in adolescence and early adulthood with skin issues. I was acne prone, and it's awful. I saw every specialist, I think, in dermatology within a 300-mile radius. My parents were so kind to, just try what might work. And there's nothing more frustrating, specifically in your adolescence, right? Um, and I've been exposed to a lot of different individuals and worked with various clients that have had similar issues. And in looking back in my experience, which of course directed me into why it's a specialty for me, is At no point did anybody ask me what I was eating when I was seeing these specialists, or inquire about my micronutrient levels or my hormone levels. I think the clinical understanding just wasn't quite there at that time, or it just hadn't gotten to who I was working with. And treatment at that time was very topical. It was heavy use of pharmaceuticals, which typically, and still today, can come with a long list of side effects that can be really scary. So luckily today, we as a health and a research community collectively are in a completely different place. And it's so great to see and to understand that. And in my training, things like dietary factors are something that very much can be at play for an individual. Skin issues often are an inflammatory condition. So looking at things like the glycemic load of their food choices, um, the balance of their microbiome. It is a huge component that we look at when I work with people, in terms of their digestive health, what needs to be modulated with their good and their bad bacteria in their gut, normalizing blood sugar, insulin sensitivity. All of these are important factors to consider.
Yeah, wonderful. It's crazy to think like how much is really contributing to skin issues. And I mean, we're talking about a wide variety too, but we're speaking to acne too right now. And it's so interesting how like that's not considered as our conventional practice for addressing these things.
Mhm.
And I wish I knew that too, because I had dealt with acne for such a long time and I was
Mhm.
basically put on medications and like, kind of band-aid type solutions. And it wasn't until I figured out a lot of stuff that was causing mine too that was like, wow, okay, that's good to know. Great to know that we address the root causes. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I'm curious because I know you work with folks dealing with other kinds of health conditions too. Through your experience, what do you feel like the biggest struggles people face when they're dealing with a chronic health issue?
Yes, I think if I were to kind of answer that, and there's many ways to answer that, but I think one of the biggest things that I notice with individuals is that are struggling with a chronic condition, whether that be low energy, lethargy, constant pain, or GI discomfort, or even just not sleeping, that they assume that that's just how they're going to feel the rest of their life, that that's just how their body is. And I think that that can be attributed to our healthcare system as it stands in this country. Conventionally, it doesn't allow individuals to take control of their health in a proactive way. It's often the reverse. It's managing symptoms. It's treating symptoms, as they present. Whereas integrative medicine is looks at that in the reverse of how can we proactively take care of our health. And certainly pharmaceuticals or surgery that are within the conventional system, there is a place for that. But if we can look at things from a proactive standpoint, and what I mean by that is, our body biologically is made up of all these interconnected domains. Let's take, for instance, the gut, the hormone, or I should say the gut immune brain connection. We know that those three systems work in an interconnected way. So if we are to look at an individual and understand, their biology, their behaviors, their social behaviors, their environmental factors, and understanding how these are all working together, then we can identify ways that they might negatively be affecting their health. So it really is kind of the healing from within, versus wait for those symptoms to present. and then we will treat them, which oftentimes is a time period that we don't necessarily need to wait for, but that's just what we have been raised in
Mhm.
with our healthcare mentality. So I think that is one of the biggest things that I want to sort of like debunk for individuals that I work for or work with, I should say. Um, and understanding that you don't have to feel this way. This isn't just how you're going to be, and that things will continue to escalate because that's the nature of being a human. Um, but that there's a lot of things we can look at that aren't necessarily topical or, a direct symptom.
Mhm. Yeah, it's something that I feel like so many people can relate to is this idea, especially if they've been dealing with a health issue for a long time, or like they may not even know how they're feeling is
Yes.
not optimal, right? Or like not where, and I hate the word should, but like,
Mhm.
yeah, just not optimal, like not how the
Mhm.
body is supposed to feel
Mhm.
if it's well nourished and like everything's in balance. So that can be a tricky thing. And sometimes, again, it's not until people start making changes that they realize, like, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
I could have been
Yeah.
feeling so much better just because so many common symptoms like digestive issues and low energy and hormonal imbalance and acne and skin issues, like all these things have become such the norm.
Mhm.
So yeah, both like also not realizing but just feeling like, oh, this is kind of just how it's going to be and my options aren't really ideal or maybe come with side effects. So I love, thanks for describing more about just kind of what integrative nutrition and medicine is and like what it entails, really like understanding what the body needs, getting into balance in a really natural way.
Mhm.
So wonderful. Yeah, thanks for going into that.
Yeah.
What do you find the biggest misconceptions are about working with integrative nutritionist like
Mhm.
yourself?
That's a great question. I think where I want to go with that is the idea being this is going to be an all or nothing mentality. I hear that a lot. And whether it's, somebody that I'm, know personally or working with professionally, that we are going to work together. And hypothetically, I'm going to tell them all the things that they can't eat and
Hmm.
that they can't do, even if it's their favorite things, and to change everything in their life as they know it. That just is not sustainable. And I think that that could be an approach of some, but that's not the approach in our practice. And it is, in fact, very different. And it is a progressive understanding of what isn't working for that individual. So identifying ways that, or I should say, identifying components of one's life that need support or need change, and understanding an individual's sort of state of willingness to change, and start to rebuild their system. So that sounds very sort of scientific, and that's sort of how we as practitioners look at it. But how a client or how a patient would feel it is, so I'm noticing that this group of foods makes you feel this way, or you might not necessarily feel these things, but this might be going on based on some unique factors that we understand about your body through various functional testing. So that's nutritional guidance, that's consultation around various supplements and botanicals. And a big one that I have a deep passion for is identifying mind and body practices that will work for you. So, whether that be improving your sleep, improving your movement, um, de stressing, finding out modalities, and discovering different modalities that maybe someone hasn't tried before, or they haven't given it a fair shot. Because at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that the human body is so intelligent and it is designed for healing. Sometimes it just needs to be reminded how to do that at times. And so that's really kind of the approach of that progressive change that we're talking about.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think that's such an important thing to point out is that, like, you don't need to be, and you're never going to be 100% ready to,
Yeah,
like, I mean, to like do a complete overhaul of your life. And it's like, even if you do need to do that, it's not like it's going to happen overnight. And it's like working with an integrative nutritionist is more about, okay, like, let's set some really reasonable goals that feel feasible and getting that support along the way to make those changes in a more incremental way.
yeah,
So yeah, thanks so much for talking more on that. And I love what you said because it's so true. The body is designed for healing. It just needs to be reminded sometimes, given like all of the factors that can contribute to things getting out of balance. Just living in the modern world that we currently live in with all the stressors and our food
yeah,
system and all that good stuff that
yeah,
we're exposed to is just good to get that support. So and that segues perfectly into my next question, but and you answered it a little bit, but why is it really important to work with an integrative nutritionist? And then what do you find are some of the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to figure out what's going on with their health?
yes. Yeah, that's really important. It's very important to find somebody that you feel will help you in a meaningful way. And there's it can be inundating. It can feel overwhelming to find a provider that you feel is a match, and can support you in the way that will sustain you in the long term. And I think a huge component of my professional training is guiding those that I work with in an evidence based way. And this is a huge sort of learning that I took away from my first career in terms of determining what it is that you're told or what it is that you've read, whether that's something that is evidence based, that it is accurate, and is it something that's going to work for you individually? And more importantly, what it is not. So where I'm going with this is, we are inundated with media, right? Our lives are on. We have so much information coming at us through all of the mediums, and we as consumers, we expect and want sort of that 3-second answer and a one and done solution. So we've all done it, right? I'm feeling this way. I'm going to Google my symptom and then I'm going to look for my solution. And whether, that process as a whole is where I want to kind of take those individuals that I work with and hit the pause button and go through and make sure that we're following not just evidence based, like truly true modalities that have continuously on a consistent basis been backed by scientific research and the health community for decades, but also to point out, there are some areas of caution even within this that we need to think about based on what we know about you individually. So, we want that distilled answer. Everything that we hear, we may necessarily be reading about something that is fact based, but it wouldn't necessarily be support every individual that's reading that.
Mm,
So,
mm,
there's things to think about, like your, potential nutritional status deficiencies that you might have that you don't know about, your genetic makeup, other influences that may trigger a negative reaction. So that's my job. My job is to make it easier to present for you. This is information that you do need to pay attention to that will be helpful to you rather than everything that you see in all of your mediums. So I think that that's probably a big distinction in terms of our approach and being realistic around what it is that we know as fact versus what is unknown. And that is, I think, a huge responsibility of a health professional, of a nutritionist, of a dietitian, to say, we don't know enough about this area. I think an example that I think about the most is our microbiome. It's this word that's out there. We have a lot of research around it. We think about, all right, well, then here's this probiotic. Here's these appropriate foods that give me a natural prebiotic, probiotic element, and it supports my overall digestive system. This is all true, but it needs to be very specific and tailored to the individual. And we are only scratching the surface in terms of the research with the microbiome or our gut bacteria. So there is still sort of a wait and see approach with that, along with a lot of other topics. So it's our job to say, this is what we know. This is what we don't yet know. We can't consider it as fact. It could very well change. But here's what we do know, and here's what we can do that will support you. Is that sort of a hodgepodge? But that's kind of one of the big differentiators that I think about with integrative.
Yeah, well, and I'm so glad you spoke to the importance of like evidence-based practice because I think sometimes there is another misconception around like holistic support or natural support
Yes.
that like sometimes it's not all evidence-based, which is actually again a big misconception. And there are definitely people out there that do not follow evidence-based practice. So but there's also other practitioners in the conventional world that do not follow evidence-based practice. So it is really important to know that like this is definitely an area that we take very seriously to pay attention to the research and make recommendations accordingly. And recommendations that obviously make sense considering like what we don't know. And there's something. Oh yeah, so I think it's also super important to realize too, and I'm sure like people fully understand this, but things have changed so much. Like if we think about fat, for example, like we thought fat was terrible a while ago, and we still, there's still a lot of people out there who like still feel like fat is bad. And again, it's like it's also not black and white. It's really about getting that individualized support, which is why getting support from someone is so important because research changes, your body changes, and your body's unique. And so it's really helpful in kind of helping navigate all of the new information and changing information.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for filling us in on that. And I guess tell me a little bit about I know so in the practice, like we typically use the Vibrant Health Protocol. Tell us a little bit about like different kinds of tools that you use to kind of again help figure out what could be contributing to someone's symptoms outside of using again that evidence to kind of tailor those recommendations. Like what other tools might you use?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good mention, the Vibrant Health Protocol. So that's just for our listeners, that's a framework that we use, basically allows for individualized strategy with various treatment plans, taking into consideration, results from functional testing, unique conditions, circumstances, and sensitivities, environmental factors that we know about that we're trying to mediate around. And this allows for us to set goals and provide you, the client, helpful tools that feel achievable to you. And so within that, and to answer your question more directly, what does it look like to work with me? So I would describe my approach. I would describe it as therapeutic, and that's a word that's thrown out a lot. But what I mean by that is, I want every person that I work with to feel understood, to feel accepted, and to feel empowered. Ultimately, it's my job to advocate for my clients, and in that, holding them accountable in the process. So, how I do that is by staying in touch, by educating them on, strategies that are helpful to them and their individual makeup and what we know about them, but also how to recognize and manage um, specific stressors in their life that could be contributing to perhaps less than optimal health or wellness. So, you know, it's a partnership, to be honest. It's not a, okay, let's meet. I'm going to tell you immediately what to do, and then I'll never see you again. That it's a journey, it's a process, which is why our business is designed how it is in terms of um, an ongoing relationship that allows us to focus on how your innate systems are functioning or where they might need support. And, I think in terms of the accountability piece, I subscribe to something that is referred to as the self determination theory. And basically, that means that uh, if someone is really going to make a change on a consistent basis, that they have to be able to recognize something that feels good and meaningful to them. So they would choose elements or new shifts in behavior that feel good to them. They feel meaningful to them, and with that, those are usually the behaviors that stay consistent on a long-term basis. So that's a huge component of working with somebody is what is it that feels achievable to you that reaches your goals, and that's a huge list of different things. It can be very personalized. What works for somebody is not going to work for somebody else. Complete avoidance is oftentimes not going to work for most people. So let's get creative. Let's think about ways that we ultimately can create a plan where you feel you are on a path for success. And I'm there to hold you accountable.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks for that's interesting about the self-determination theory too. Like, yes, if someone obviously finds something valuable and meaningful, it would make more sense that they would continue that. But if not, then you need to kind of shift goals and figure out what works best for them. Yeah, it sounds like I know you are extremely supportive and you give like really good recommendations and great ideas and are just really, really there to make sure that you're doing everything you can to allow someone to be successful. And so thanks for going into that a little bit more. I'm sure people are curious to know how they can find you. What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah. I think the best way is probably on the SeaandSpruceNutrition.com website. And you will see under the team, you'll see my name and you can book a consultation, a free complimentary that we call it a strategy session. So just that's really the easiest way to get in touch with me and we can connect and see if we're a good fit to work together.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on and doing this interview. And again,
Yeah, thank
for
you.
anyone who's tuned in, I will actually put the link to our website and how to book a call with us in the notes here. But thanks so much, Andrea, and take care, everyone. Have a good
Cheers.
one.
Bye.
Bye.